Hello and welcome to this webinar with Informa. My name is Lynn Hunter. I'm one of the client solution managers at Informa. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of an intro and some housekeeping during this webinar. And then I will pass you on to Darren for the actual webinar. So thank you very much for taking the time to join us. We really do appreciate it. We're sort of bringing this webinar to you because sort of during these turbulent times in the market, due to sort of stalling and brand revenues are beginning to shrink, executives really need to understand the marketing effectiveness and who will respond to sort of leveraging these brands to drive growth. So we thought this would be an ideal topic to provide you with a webinar on. Darren Coleman is an expert in this particular field, and he will go into more detail about his experience in this particular area when he gets into the webinar. So thank you very much, Darren, for doing the webinar with us. The webinar is fully engaged. It's a fully engaged sort of exercise. We ask you to get engaged and to join in as much as possible. So therefore, we would ask that you take out your phones or ideally your phones, and go to a website which is www.sli.do.com. I think it's coming up in the chat, that website address. And if you type in the numbers that you see on the screen, we'll do a couple of polls, a couple of questions during the session. And if you log into that particular site, you'll be able to interact with these polls that we're going to do. In the chat box, you can write in any questions, and towards the end of the session with Darren, time permitting, hopefully we'll be able to answer as many questions as we possibly can at the end of the actual session. If you have any problems, any technical issues during the session, then please just press the refresh button on your browser. And that's a bit like you would do on YouTube or something along those lines, and that'll bring you right back to us. So I will now hand you over to Darren. I will turn off my camera because you don't want to listen to me, you want to listen to Darren. And I hope you enjoy the session. Thank you, Darren.
Thank you, Lynn. Good morning from the UK, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you to share some thoughts on delivering brand-driven growth. So even at the best of times, this is a challenge that a number of our clients face, but it's particularly the case at the moment, given to the challenging economic conditions that a number of them are facing. So keen to partner with Informa today to provide some practical tools and tips for how you can drive growth at your organization through brands. So what do I want to give you in this talk? Well, I want to give you the confidence and conviction to be able to go to your senior executive team to get them to invest in brands. This is easier said than done, so I want to arm you with some insights that will enable you to approach with a more data-driven marketing effectiveness approach. So we're going to focus on brand-driven growth, the notion of driving growth through brands as an intangible asset. And in order to do that, I want to share a practical management tool that we've used for some time now with a variety of clients around the globe across sectors. And that's called the Brand-Driven Growth Blueprint. So I want to talk you through that from a fairly high level today, so you get a sense for how you too could possibly use this practical management tool to drive growth at your organization. So the beauty of the brand-driven growth frame blueprint is that it can facilitate structure and scale. A lot of time when organizations try to grow through brands, they adopt a fairly erratic and haphazard approach. So what I want to do, courtesy of this practical management tool, is to enable you to grow through brands in a structured and scalable way. So recently I published a book on building brand experiences. I'm happy to send one digital copy to someone that poses me the best question. So at the end of the session, there'll be an option for Q&A, and the person that I think asks the smartest, dare I say, most challenging question, then I'll be very glad to get their details and send them a digital copy of my book. So the business case for brands. I spend an awful lot of my time either helping CMOs to convince their CFO or CEO to invest in brands, or alternatively, working with CEOs and CFOs directly on their brand investment case. But it's not easy. The senior C-suite teams tend to come from financial backgrounds, so brand is a world that they don't tend to understand more times than not. So what I want to do is first pose a question to you. And if you could go to slido.com, enter the code 7412 and answer this question. I think the executive team at my organization understands that brands can drive growth. Please select one option. Yes, no, not sure, don't know, or are you crazy? So if you can give that a go, and we'll see what you think. We've got one. Not sure. Right, we know there are more than 7 people on the webinar by some stretch. Well, no one thinks I'm crazy yet, that's fair enough. Shall we give this another 10 seconds, Lynn? Okay, let's keep pressing on. 14. So it looks then as if a lot of you are in quite a fortunate position because you've got supportive C-suites. In all honesty with you, more times than not, that doesn't tend to be the case. So what I want to do is share a few more trickling in. 16. I don't want to cut you off.
Just a few people are maybe struggling with Slido, Darren. There's a few people who are actually typing into the chat and saying not sure as their answer.
Right. Okay. Well, no one thinks that I'm crazy yet. That's a result.
So far.
Yeah.
So I think you could probably move on from there.
Okay. So more times than not, it tends to be the case that marketers struggle to get the support of the C-suite. So those of you that did answer the question, I think you're in a fairly fortunate position. But there's been some very influential research that Les Binet and Peter Field have done in the context of effectiveness. And they've conducted an extensive study, and this is a really nice soundbite, where the data based on 40 years worth of marketing effectiveness studies outlines how brand building dominates long-term growth. But on the flip side, short-term sales activation is bad news. It's unwise, always, because it takes the value out of the brand and undermines the possible premium that you could be charging. And again, Janet Hull from the Director of Marketing Strategy from IPA, again, from a similar data bank for the IPA, she talked about how over 40 years, they know that brand building lies at the heart of sustainable, profitable growth. So the IPA's database for marketing effectiveness is based on submissions of the best campaigns. So they're starting from a very high base point here. So when you are approaching the C-suite, even if you are in a good position where they do believe in the power of brands, data is always a good idea. And I want to share a few charts with you that I use on a fairly regular basis to twist the arm of the CEO, CFO, or to help the CMO. So what you can see here is that short term, there are these spikes in sales activation. And if you're going to offer a 50% discount or a buy one, get one free, invariably you will get a spike in sales because people are going to pay, but they won't be coming back. Whereas if you have sustained brand building over a period of time, that's where the growth lies, because brands are emotional and brands build memory structures that influence choice. This study from Binet and Field talked about the influence of brands on market share. So there's a short-term effect and a longer-term effect that's more powerful versus direct response campaigns. So short-term activations. So send an email, download a coupon, go to the shop and get the discount. So you can see here that for direct campaigns, there's a 14% uplift, but for brand, it's 22%. But for longer-term growth, you can see that the performance of brand-driven growth really outstrips short-term direct campaigns and activations. One of the key findings from Binet and Field's work was a general rule of thumb, a heuristic, that brand investment should be about 60-40, so 60% brand, 40% activation. But that would confuse simplicity with simplification. So brand growth is actually quite nuanced. And what they found in a more recent study is, yes, brand investment tends to predominate in more sectors than others, especially financial services. But the general rule of thumb is that brand investment should be more than short-term activation to drive sustainable growth. This chart is a thing of great beauty when it comes to talking to the CFO, because they will understand these metrics here in terms of the S&P and the MSCI. And what this shows is the performance of Brand Z, part of Cantor Millward Brown, powerful brands outperforming by 317% in 2019. So yes, in a downturn, brands will take a hit to some extent, but powerful brands continue to invest, because when the clouds move and the sun starts to shine again, then the upturn in brand investment really accelerates. So powerful brands continue to invest in a downturn because they know that when the markets turn, they'll be in a powerful position to propel growth. So a lot of brands are in danger of going dark. And the problem with that is if you go dark, you move from people's consideration set. And if there's one case study that you really should share with everyone in the C-suite, particularly the CFO, is Kraft Heinz. So Kraft Heinz was bought by private equity firm 3G, and they really aggressively cut investment in brand. So 3G took over around this time here, 2017, 18, and you can see there was a lag effect in terms of brand share, stock price. But with time, that's dropped and dropped and dropped. And brands are like children. They need to be looked after and taken care of and nurtured. But if you don't take care of and nurture and invest in your brand, they won't grow. So interestingly, Kraft Heinz now are looking to double down on brand investment. So that's a powerful lesson, not just for FMCG brands, but for many brands to learn that if you cut investment and become short-term ROI driven, you will pay the price in terms of performance. So how can we use brands as a platform for growth? Well, there's a couple of examples that I want to use to try and spark your imagination. Nike has a brand essence of authentic athletic performance. Those are the parameters that Nike uses to drive growth of its brand in a variety of categories and markets. So Nike is in football, tennis, golf, a variety of other verticals. But the one thing, the common thread that runs through all of those markets is that it's all about authentic athletic performance. That was the decision, the litmus test. They're the parameters that Nike used as a decision as to whether they should or shouldn't go into that market. Nike tried to move into snowboarding and failed miserably because snowboarding, the culture that sits around snowboarding, is very different to competitive sports. So it didn't work because they couldn't take the brand into that space. Caterpillar, another facet of their brand is the personality. So the associations of it, it's rugged, bold, tough, reliable. And they started off with heavy earth moving equipment, but they've taken that personality, they've stretched and extended that personality into other markets. So rugged outdoor wear, casual wear, and they've even licensed the brand to mobile device manufacturers where you can hold the device against a wall and it takes a sensor to see where electrical cables are. So they've used the brand personality as a platform to drive growth. An example that's a bit closer to home in the Middle East is Baby Shop, and I'm a big fan of what Baby Shop is doing with Missy Chakraborty, who's the head of marketing there. So the positioning is really clear. It's about best choice, right moment. And Baby Shop have used this very effectively to leverage growth of their brand. So they have a baby expert online and in store, which helps their customers to make the best choice at the right moment for their baby. Similarly, at one point for Baby Shop, availability of stock was a problem. So they've started to use RFID tags. And now that ensures they've got the quality products that are available to give them the best choice at the right moment. Another thing that Baby Shop do is throughout the year they have a calendar, so they align with cultural events, Ramadan, Eid, or even salary weekends, and they offer specific benefits and specific campaigns to customers at that time. And again, that fits perfectly with the best choice, right moment positioning. So these are some examples of how brands have used facets of their brand as an asset to drive growth in a variety of markets. If their brands weren't clearly articulated, they wouldn't have the guiding principles that would enable them to move and grow in this way. So, how to deliver brand-driven growth? Well, there's a practical management tool that we've been using with clients for some time now across Europe, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia, and I've had great success with it. So, there are a couple of steps that are involved with the brand-driven growth blueprint. The first thing that you need to consider is, what are the objectives? What are the objectives of the business? Because the growth through the brand needs to align with those. If it doesn't, you'll be doomed from day one. Next, you need to think about your target customer or target customers. Who are they? Where do they go? What psychographic profile do they have? What are their values? What's their story? Because in its turn, that enables you then to think about your brand, values, essence, personality, positioning, and how relevant that is to the target customer. Then it's a case of thinking about the product and or experience that you want to launch. So in this sense, what you do is you think about innovations and you use the brand as a filter to see whether that product or experience fits with the brand. So this is why Baby Shop can do what it's doing around its right choice, right moment, because it's got the positioning and it's clearly understood. So what we find is that the brand acts as a filter for product and experience roadmaps, but also as well, the brand acts as a common denominator that connects with the target customer, but also filters the product and experiential roadmap. And this brand is what drives growth. And then along the bottom, all of your activities need to be underpinned by measurement. And the measurements needs to cover three areas: financial, brand, and employee. So let me go into a bit more detail on those. So the first thing you need to think about is, what corporate objectives does my brand need to support? Is it about market share? Is it about sales growth? Is it about gross or net profit margins? Is it about improving reputation? Some brands have taken a bit of a tumble recently due to the way they've behaved during COVID-19. So maybe they need to start thinking about reputation. Is it about market penetration? But it's key to have alignment. So a lot of brands are focused in a certain area, but it's essential that the objectives are aligned with the corporate objectives. So if it's about sales, or if it's about profits, or if it's about reputation, you need to ensure that the products and experiences that you're looking to launch through your brands not only resonate with the target customer, but they also support those objectives. So the next thing that you need to think about is, who is our target customer? And there are a couple of things. You need to think about the existing customers. Can you sell more to them? A lot of brands are very focused on trying to find new customers, which, yes, is a key part of growth. But a lot of the time you can cross-sell and upsell to existing customers. But in terms of potential growth, that's proven to be a very effective way to drive growth. And the work of Byron Sharp and Les Binet and Peter Field empirically has shown that through marketing effectiveness, growing through new customers is a powerful way of doing things. You need to think about the profile of your target customer. Who are they? Where do they go? What do they do? What motivates them in life? What are their values? So then you can start to understand them as a person and make them real in the mind of the organization. You need to think about the feelings that they have. How do they want to feel? Maybe they want to feel secure, reassured, confident. Maybe they want to feel hopeful, inspired, amused, entertained. Whatever that feeling is, you need to try and understand that, because that's how you connect your brand with that target customer at an emotional level. What are the jobs that they want to get done? In other words, what problems are they trying to solve? This is some influential work that came out of Harvard Business School by the late Professor Kristen Claysenson. So it's worth having a look, because a lot of the time, if you ask customers what they want or what they need, they won't know. So then your strategy can be based on flawed insight. If you understand what jobs they're trying to get done, what problems they're trying to solve, then the doors of innovation fling wide open, because you can start to think about products and experiences that help them solve that problem. So Oreo Thins is an example. They found out that people wanted to enjoy a guilt-free snack. So they launched Oreo Thins as a substitute because it is lower on calories. Think about use cases. So think in detail about the life of your target customers and where they go and what they do, and how you can launch products or experiences that help them to get jobs done. But it's important to empathize. Understand the world from your target customer's perspective, because empathy delivers insight. The next thing is to think about, what is your brand? And regrettably, a lot of people operate at quite a superficial level when it comes to brand. So make sure you have one at a basic level. Have you got brand values, brand essence, brand positioning, and brand personality? So these are some of the facets that your brand should have. But a word to the wise when it comes to building brands. Firstly, try to avoid jargon. It's the quickest way to alienate the C-suite. Secondly, when you do start to think about your brand in more detail, you may find that certain parts of it need some work. So maybe the positioning's a bit loose. The essence doesn't help you determine which markets you should or shouldn't move into. If that's the case, stop and think about how you can improve that part of your brand, because if you don't, you'll be building on loose foundations. And finally, don't retrofit a product to the brand. We deal with a lot of organizations and they've got a product or experience in their mind that they think intuitively works for the target customer. But what you need to do is ensure that that product or experience fits with your brand. So for example, does this product bring our values to life? Does the experience that we're thinking of launching help express our positioning or support our personality? So it's not just a case of going all guns blazing with a product or experience to market. You need to filter those innovations through your brand to ensure that they are on brand and fit within your portfolio. So what is the product or the experience that we want to launch? So is it on brand? Does it fit with the values? Does it support your positioning? Does it convey the personality, etc.? Think about the features and benefits. A regrettable number of organizations focus on features, not benefits. Try to focus on benefits because that's where the value lies. A really interesting book is on the paradox of choice. A lot of organizations think that the solution to every problem is to launch more products or more experiences and add more features. But what the paradox of choice shows us is that too much choice stresses people out. Less is more. You need to simplify complexity. So understanding the scope of your product or experience is your job. And that's your responsibility. So less is more. Think about value and pricing. Powerful brands don't get sucked into competing through price. And the influential work of Byron Sharp on the right there, How Brands Grow, has got a fantastic chapter on the damage that price promotions do to brand value. Think about co-creating the product, so delegate some responsibility for the product or the experience so your target customers feel a part of that. And I'll show you an example in a minute, but this lends itself to experiences, and co-creating experiences is powerful because then it means that your target customer feels a part of the experience they're creating. So this is why car manufacturers are offering people the opportunity to go online and build their own car. Here's an example of how Major, FMCG brand, co-created an experience around its product. So my question for you is, how did Major co-create an experience around its product?
For many years, Major was leading cookies sector in Tunisia. However, after 8 years of media blackout, Major lost its leadership on the category and the interest of its target. It became judged old and with no personality. Our main challenge was to bring back the spotlight on Major, create its new brand image, and reconnect it to its target customers. For that, we launched a study to better understand concerns and interests of the brand main target, Tunisian youth. We found out that 69% of young Tunisians' main interest is music, especially DJs' music that make them dance and have fun. Our idea and strategic direction was to use the product as a medium to create their own delicious mix. For this goal, we set the first Tunisian digital platform of mix named the Tasty Mix, on which we uploaded a sample of sounds that we created with the product itself. Crispy sounds, product opening sounds, crunchy sounds, in a collaboration with the #1 DJ in Tunisia. The modeling was a drum machine, which was the exact replica of the professional DJ's platine, on which people could log in and mix the Major ad song. We launched our context during the most famous entertainment TV show in Tunisia, bringing the most known DJ in the country to challenge youth to participate, which gave us more credibility and affinity with the target. During the contest, we featured some of the most delicious mixes every day on the radio #1 in Tunisia to create more interest and to invite more people to jump and be part of the contest. Delicious and original mixes were shared on social media and competed in a global contest to show how original Tunisians youth can be, which generated a lot of interaction on social medias, getting youth more involved with the brand. After the Tasty Mix activation, the results were incredible. The brand personality totally changed, and 61% are judging the brand young, fun, and modern now. 64% are seeking to buy the new product of Major. Also, people logged on the platform more than 32,000 times. They performed more than 8,000 mix. And most importantly, sales increase went from 12% before the activation to 190% after it.
So that's an example of how a brand clearly understood an objective, sales, understood the target customer, what they're into, music, club scene, youth culture, and then they thought about how they could launch an experience wrapped around the product that fit with how they wanted the brand personality to be perceived. And then you can see the measurement along the bottom. So, how can you measure success? My first piece of advice is be collaborative. sit down with key stakeholders, CEO, CFO, line managers, CMO, whoever it may be that's going to be a part of this strategy, and say, what are the key KPIs that we will be judged by? And then try to factor those into them, because a lot of the time the process of measuring is as important, if not more important, than the measurement. So getting people involved so they feel heard and they feel understood, and then they're a part of this team that is focused on one goal of driving growth through brands, is the first thing I would advise that you do. But also as well, you need to take a balanced and causal approach. So that entails obtaining financial, employee and brand metrics. So financial metrics, sales, margin, EBITDA, these types of things. Employee metrics could relate to product knowledge, experience knowledge, whether they recommend that product, whether they recommend that experience, whether they're thinking of leaving your organization, because if they are, they're not going to deliver a great experience for your customers. Then the brand metrics could relate to penetration, salience, emotional resonation, ability to charge price premiums. So these are balanced because financial metrics are hard metrics. Employee and brand metrics are soft metrics. Financial metrics tend to be short term, whereas employee and brand metrics tend to be longer term. So what you're doing is you're counteracting short term, long term, hard and soft measures with each other to give your approach more balance. At a more sophisticated level, you can use these three sets of metrics to measure causally. And the way to do that is employee metrics drive brand metrics, and employee and brand metrics drive financial metrics. So if you want to understand what's driving profits as a financial metric, you need to understand the employee metrics and the brand metrics, because if your employees don't care, they're going to deliver a terrible experience. And if the experience is terrible, the money isn't going to come in. So a lot of the time, people are very focused on short-term and retrospective financial metrics, whereas employee and brand metrics are forward-looking and they can be preemptive, because if they're dropping, as sure as night follows day, then the financial metrics will drop. But if they are dropping, it gives you a window of opportunity to do something about it before the financial metrics drop. So take a balanced and causal approach, and also a collaborative approach. And then it's this idea of assessing fit. So you need to make sure that the metrics that you are going to take fit with the corporate objectives, because if they don't align, you're going to be doomed from day one, because the C-suite just won't be interested. So I want to give a worked example, but before I can, I want to see what you can remember from the brand-driven growth blueprint. So apparently goldfish have got short-term memories. Let's see how this works. So which of the following is not part of the brand-driven growth blueprint? Please select one. Objectives, customer, target customer, brand, product experience, smoking shisha, or measurement. So which one of those is not part of the brand-driven growth blueprint? Smoking shisha, someone's got it. Let's see if we can get a bit more engagement on this question, because we know how many people are out there and it's a lot more than 15 or 16. Here we go. Seems like most people have got it. So yeah, objectives, target customer, brand, product experience, and measurement. And I'm afraid to say smoking shisha is not a part of the brand-driven growth blueprint. Oh, a few more trickling in. Here we go. Okay, let's keep moving on. So I want to try and show you a worked example for how this could possibly play out for Nike with a market that they're growing at the moment. So if we start with the objective, this is purely an illustrative example. Okay, Nike isn't a client. We're not familiar with the internal workings of their business, but I just want to show you how the blueprint can play out. So you'd have an objective to increase revenue from non-product activities from 100 million to 900 million by 2025. So that's a key objective. Target customer, they're keen to up their game. They want to stay ahead of the pack. They're a winner. They're competitive. You know, they're not sitting around. They're not just sort of like chilling out and taking it easy. They want to be the best they can. A facet of the Nike brand that we'd focus on is authentic athletic performance. So you can see how authentic athletic performance would resonate with a target customer that wants to stay ahead of the pack. They're a winner. They're competitive. They're keen to up their game. And the product experience could be tennis, football, rugby, or golfing academies. Yeah? But to make sure that that experience is on brand, you would bring the brand to life in certain ways. So inspiring feature walls, motivational quotes, nutritional food, but they all convey authentic athletic performance. So what you can see here is we've got the brand and we've taken a facet of authentic athletic performance that resonates with the target customer because they're a winner, but also as well the experience, the way in which it's delivered is on brand. So you wouldn't walk in there and it wouldn't be a chilled out, relaxed experience. You'd walk in there and you'd feel energized to compete, to win, to do your best. And then underpinning this could be a suite of metrics around your employees that are working at those experiential venues. So for example, what's their knowledge like of the latest sports science, the latest nutrition that can help these people maximize their performance, the brand perception around price premiums, the relevance of the experience, the salience of the experience, and then the financial metrics. Are people prepared to pay? How much are they prepared to pay? What's the profit margin, etc. So this is a worked example of how you can start with the objectives, think about the target customer, make sure the brand aligns with the target customer, and then launch product or experiences that are on brand but drive growth in terms of aligning with the objectives. And that is underpinned by measurement that is employee, financial, and brand based. So that's a high-level example of how this would work. And this is something that we're working on with Informa to deliver both in-house and through public courses online. So if I go back to the start, this talk, I wanted to give you some confidence and conviction with regards to investing in brands. So we looked at a number of studies there that were very financially orientated that showed how brands drove growth. So we've focused on thinking about how brands as an asset can be used to drive growth. And we've used a practical management tool, the brand-driven growth blueprint. And that's a practical management tool that we've used extensively with clients to structure their approach and facilitate scalable growth. So that's it. Thank you. Take care and keep going. I'm aware there are difficult times out there, but keep going. In terms of how we could work with you from Informa's perspective, there's training on brand-driven growth, retaining relevance through a downturn through experiences, deliver virtual keynotes on growth, experiences, brand performance. This is virtual or live interactive online training, and that can be customized to your sector. And there's also executive mentoring and development. So if you're interested, please reach out to a member of the Informa team. So now for some questions. And the best question, I will be very happy to send them a copy of my book, a digital copy. Lynn, over to you.
Thank you, Darren. We have a question here from Ihab. Do you think that the presented brand-driven growth is expected to change post-COVID-19? If yes, how is it expected to change, especially that the world is moving forward towards digitalization?
Yeah, good question, Ahab. On the assumption the world does change drastically, which is a hot topic in marketing at the moment, on the assumption it does change, then I think what you will find is objectives become more digitally driven, as you've implied from your question, but also as well the experiences or the products on the right-hand side of the blueprint become more digitally driven. And also as well, there may be a need from a customer perspective, not only to sell or push products that are digitally driven, but to help customers to use them. There may be a need to educate and school some target groups on how to use digital technologies so they can make the most of those products. So on the assumption things do really sway digitally, and personally, I think it will probably be somewhere in between. But yeah, I think those two areas there in terms of products and the customer will need to become more digitally focused, and mobile will become an increasingly important part of that. Mobile is the future.
Thank you, Darren. We also have Bina saying, how does the brand-driven growth strategy integrate into the overall growth strategy of the company?
Yeah, good question, Bina. So when you go from the start and you're thinking about corporate objectives, those corporate objectives will be plugged into, ideally, the overall strategy. So as long as your mindset for brand-driven growth dovetails with those corporate objectives, by default, what you're doing will align with the overarching growth strategy, corporate strategy for the company. Thank you.
And the next one is, I believe brand-driven growth works only for private commercial companies. How can the brand-driven growth assist government agencies?
Good question. Slightly trickier question. There will be objectives that governments have. So happiness, for example, emotional well-being is quite a big one in Dubai. So if you think about that, and then you think about your brand, you can think about how your brand can support well-being of the people, and then the products and experiences that you are launching for the people as target customers would need to focus on supporting that objective for well-being, as an example. Another example for a public sector may be to drive revenues. It may be to cut costs. It may be to increase profitability. It may be to raise awareness or reposition a country. A number of markets, this is happening. We're working with an organization in Brunei, and Brunei is moving slowly but surely away from oil and gas and repositioning, and the same is happening in Saudi. So if you've got that overarching objective, which public sector organizations will be plugged into, then it's a case of how can brands align with that are working with the public sector, or how can the public sector launch products and experiences that support that overarching objective. So it's a good question, that one. Yeah.
Thank you. And then, excuse me, then one from Arwood. Oftentimes, especially with new brands, utilizing the brand to its maximum potential is almost like trying to run before walking. What are some of the key things brands should think about when they're establishing what it is that defines them?
Another good question. My immediate response is take some baseline measures. So get out to your customers or other stakeholders and listen to them, understand the factors that drive choice, how they feel about your brand, take some employee metrics, so you have a baseline dashboard of employee, brand, and financial metrics. That will give you some insights with regards to what your strategy should be. Build and start to execute that strategy, and then re-administer those measures again. It could be quarterly, it could be biannual, or it could be annually, probably biannual at a minimum. So then you would be able to see in no uncertain terms what's working. And this goes back to the point of taking a balanced approach to measuring brands through financial, employee, and brands. That if you cover financial, brand, and employee, you're covering short and long-term, hard and soft measures, internal and external measures. So that would be my advice. Measure at the start, but also engage key stakeholders with the measurement process, because then they'll realize that you're taking brand growth seriously and scientifically. So measure and engage people, key stakeholders in the measurement process, and measure on a regular basis so that you can fine-tune your strategy and show that brands are delivering. So yeah, that's my advice there.
Thank you, Darren. And then one from Lama. Is it a good idea for brands to use influencers to push it forward? Whether or not, how do you suggest allocating marketing budget?
Right. Influencers are an interesting topic. It depends on the market that you are in. So fashion brands are using influencers a lot, but without giving any specific names away, the problem with a lot of influencers is that when the authenticity of their claims can be challenged and tested, there's actually not much substance on a lot of occasions. So that can result in the credibility of their claims being in tatters. So you really need to be confident that the person that you're dealing with is authentic and is the real deal. And that their personal brand fits and aligns with your brand. And that's my first piece of advice. You're seeing a lot of scientific brands at the moment. They're partnering with eminent professors. And these are very, generally speaking, credible thought leaders. So a lot of big pharma and biotech brands are partnering with professors from leading universities. So every time you turn on the news, there's someone from a leading university, and these professors are almost becoming public figures now. And I'm sure the smart ones will use that as a platform for growing their personal brand. So the first thing is make sure they're authentic. Second thing is make sure that they align with your brand, values level, personality, and positioning. In terms of ROI, it's how long's a piece of string? It's a really difficult question to ask, because you could get a very influential, credible influencer in who's a superstar, and the ROI would be astonishing. But maybe you want to go with a micro-influencer, stay-at-home mum or something like that, and these will have a small number of followers, but the ratio of investment to ROI may actually be higher. So then it's the cumulative effect of all those micro-influencers, and that's a trend that's happening. A lot of big brands are actually starting to work very closely with micro-influencers because they've got very close relationships with their communities.
Thank you, Darren. Firas has a question going back to the slide that you had on the stock price of Heinz, and how we could see that it dropped drastically in conjunction with the decrease in investment in marketing. How can we highlight the causality rather than the correlation?
Yeah, good question. So this was very much causal because the investment in brand stopped. So 3G Capital is a Brazilian private equity fund, and they are renowned for asset stripping. And that's what happened. One of the major assets was the brand, and they stopped investing in the brand. And they got really powerful brands, Heinz tomato ketchup, things like that. So it was absolutely a case of causation, not correlation, because it wasn't the stock that affected the decision. it was actually the decision that affected the stock. So yeah, that was why it was causation, not correlation. Another very good question.
Mm-hmm. Do you think with the advent of technological change, brands will take a back seat?
It depends on which technological change you're talking about. If that's 5G, if that's IoT, digital transformation. I think at a basic level, I think a lot of people, particularly in the branding space, overestimate the importance or the emotional attachment that people have to brands. Brands play an important role, but I think a lot of the time people can overegg the value, the importance of brands. So you need to keep it within context, within the scope of other things that an organization's doing. But I don't see why the importance of brands would be diluted. I think what will happen is the way in which people engage with brands will change. So, for example, with 5G or virtual reality or augmented reality, I think that will allow brands to bring their values and their personality and positioning to life in more engaging and experiential ways. And it will expose weaker brands, because what it will enable is that it will enable customers to dig deeper into the fabric of a brand and really get under the skin of the brand by delving into an immersive experience. And as you delve into that immersive experience, then you'll really be able to start to assess the credentials of that brand. And that's what COVID-19 is doing at the moment, because a lot of people are spending time online. They're really being able to assess the authenticity of the claims that a number of brands are making. So I think technology will expose a number of brands, and I think brands that are authentic and can be trusted, they will thrive. But I think the ones that aren't well articulated and they're not clear about their brand, I think they'll struggle because they're built on poor foundations.
Thank you. Ramesh has a question that just kind of follows on from what you were just saying about the brand quality. And he's saying that during COVID-19 lockdown, unknown local brands have experienced huge trials and customers seem to be pleasantly surprised with the quality. How do they become brands in the new normal?
Become platform businesses, and scale as quickly as they can. There's an absolute window of opportunity for small businesses at the moment, and scale online platforms and use that as an opportunity. So I can give you a personal example. We shop at a local greengrocer because I'm a fan. My wife and I are fans of supporting local trade, and they deliver produce to our home, and we're crying out for them just literally to create a simple e-commerce site. But you still call them, you go through the process, give your card details, and that's just not scalable. Yeah, they should be buying online e-commerce sites and ramping up. They've got a window of opportunity to capitalize on the sentiment at the moment, and that sentiment is very much changing towards taking care of each other. And this almost ties in with the sort of local brands. What's the name they've cropped up for? Gin and breweries and food, artisan coffee, stuff like this. People are getting a bit turned off like a lot of these big brands. So smaller local brands that have got feeling and emotional relevance, they've got that opportunity. So they should be becoming platform businesses, absolutely, and leverage that emotional connection they've got in their community. So I hope they do it.
Thank you. Dareen has a question. How do you integrate short-term activation with long-term growth?
Good question. My immediate advice would be, if you can, read the extensive report by Binet and Field, which talks about the balance between brand growth and activation. So generally speaking, there's this 60-40 split, although it's a bit more nuanced. But what you need to be doing is finding a balance. So let's say it is 60% brand, 40% activation. Then you need to be taking activations to market that fit within the scope of your brand. And the second point I would make is try to avoid price-driven activations, because once you've profiled your target customer and you understand them as a person, you understand the jobs they're trying to get done, you understand how they want to feel, the emotions that drive their choice, then you'll be able to launch activations that operate at an emotional level. And it's the emotion that someone feels that drive choice. Whereas if you are focusing purely on functional product features and price, you'll be in danger of commoditizing your offer. So my answer is yes, have activations in terms of this 60-40 balance or whatever it may be for your sector, but make sure the activations, or it's advisable that the activations aren't price driven, because people will become attached to your price, not your brand. And secondly, don't focus on function, because there's no emotion in function, and humans' decisions are primarily driven by the emotion we feel. But have a look at Binet and Field's work. It's a really influential piece of work. And if you're stuck, send me a mail or send someone at Informa a mail, and I can send you a version of it.
Thank you. Just a few more. Abir, how can brand-driven growth be maintained for a newly launched brand when sales numbers are the priority to be generated and in no time, especially within a UAE competitive market?
Sorry, there are a number of points in that question. Could you run it by me again?
Sorry. Sure. How can brand-driven growth be maintained for a newly launched brand when the sales numbers are the priority to be generated quickly, especially within the UAE competitive market?
Okay. Without knowing the sector that you're operating in, it's a bit tricky, but my advice would be to bundle, to offer value. So let's just use Baby Shop as an example. So instead of offering buy one, get one free or huge discounts, it could well be that you offer baby clothes bundled with a 1 hour session with the baby expert. So as opposed to discounting, layer on value, and that will generate the sales, and you're using that as a cross-sell or upsell opportunity. That would be my advice. But I do understand the context in terms of being short-term sales driven, but hopefully now you can see that a short-term sales driven, ROI-focused approach will deliver those spikes in sales, but you may not have a brand to go to in a short period of time, I'm afraid.
And that kind of links in with the next question from Mohammed, saying, do you think lower priced brand is likely to win over a more expensive brand?
Depends on the category. We've worked across a variety of markets, from commodities to luxury. And based on my experience, I can't think of one market where a consumer or a business makes a decision based purely on price. And we've worked with people that are making road salt, to melt the ice here in the UK, right through to customized luxury products. Price can be more or less important in certain markets, but what you want to be doing is thinking about the value that you can deliver. And Apple is an example. In the last downturn, if you look at the stock price of Apple, it actually didn't drop. And Apple didn't discount during the last recession because it understood the value of what it had. So if people perceive there to be value in what you've got, they'll pay for it. So that's why it's important to think about value. And Mohammed, I'd encourage you, if you haven't already read it, to read the work of Byron Sharp. And there's a chapter on price promotions. I think it's chapter 10. And it lays out in no uncertain terms the irreversible damage that price promotions do to brands. Buy that, and maybe buy a copy for your senior management team.
And I think this might be the last question we've got time for, and there's a couple of questions within it. So how do we evaluate the brand achievement? What should be the brand matrix in comparison with the corporate matrix? And what are the control mechanisms or control points?
Oh, blimey. Right, so the first question, sorry.
So the first one was, how do we evaluate the brand achievement?
Right, let's go for that one. So I'm assuming that you mean brand achievement is a proxy for brand performance. So I would go back to the point of measuring across financial metrics, employee metrics, and brand metrics, but also engaging stakeholders in obtaining those metrics so they feel a part of the process. And that will enable you to measure cause and effect. The reason being that employee metrics drive brand metrics, and employee and brand metrics drive financial metrics. And there's statistical methods such as structural equation modeling that you can use that will help you show that causal relationship. So that's how I would address that first question. And then a brand and a product matrix, I'm not entirely sure what that means, I'm sorry.
So it was what should be the brand matrix in comparison with the corporate matrix?
I'm really sorry. When you're talking about a brand matrix, it could mean a variety of things. If I can try and take a guess at what that question means and then answer it. So let's assume that you've got the corporate matrix, and that talks about corporate values, corporate positioning, corporate personality, and corporate essence. And then you've got the brand values, brand essence, brand personality, brand positioning. I hope that's what you mean. So what you need to do is ensure that the brand matrix, the brand itself, aligns and supports and reinforces the overall brand. So this is why Nike can start to move into performance centers, because it fits with authentic athletic performance. But this is also why car brands such as Toyota, when they launched Lexus, actually didn't think they could launch a premium luxury brand, relatively speaking, under the Toyota brand, because the brand matrix, if I understand you correctly, for Lexus didn't fit under the brand matrix for Toyota. So in that instance, they looked at their brand architecture and actually realized they couldn't have a sub-brand. They had to create a new brand. I hope that answers that question. If not, drop me a mail and I'll be happy to answer it, or drop Lynn a mail.
Thank you, Darren. Sorry?
The third question?
There was, what are the control mechanisms or control points?
Control mechanisms and control points. Again, I'd have to take a guess at what that question means. The control mechanisms will be measurements across the board, employee, brand, financial. That could be weekly, monthly, quarterly, biannual. So again, I'd go back to measuring holistically. And the control mechanisms, yeah, online, offline, measure. But in terms of measurement, if you are just starting out on measurement, I would start small, take measures, analyze, iterate, do something, and measure again. Don't over measure at the start, because you will get the cliched paralysis from analysis. You'll spend as much time collecting the data and figuring out what to do with it as you would actually making decisions and taking your brand forward. So within that framework of financial, brand, and employee, take a cluster of measures and collect data on a regular basis, analyze, iterate, do something, and measure again. And then you'll start to be able to fine tune your approach. And that would be my advice there in terms of.
Thank you. There's been a follow-up question on the influencer, but I do think you've already answered it, but let me just ask anyway. What should be the strategy to become influencer brand in social media, especially for the government? I think you covered that already, didn't you? Am I right?
Yeah, but it's kind of a similar question, but a different facet of it. So with governments, the stakes are especially high because of their profile and the exposure and the magnitude of what they do. But I would go back to the point of thinking about what is the country's brand. Think about at a basic level, values, essence, personality, positioning. So once you're clear on what the brand for the country is, then you need to think about influencers that will fit with that brand as it is now or as you would like it to be. And you start to see this with World Cups and big sporting events. So when a country is hosting an event, then they'll start to align with sporting personalities, but certain sporting personalities that embody values and personality traits and support the positioning that that country has or aspires to have. So it's the same principle. Understand your brand in the middle. Values, essence, personality, positioning is a starting point. But then instead of it being a target customer, it's actually a target influencer. And then think about the type of person, the type of people that you could partner with that have traits and values, etc., that embody what your brand's about. And then they would become the face of your brand. But they'll need to understand your brand very carefully so that when they do communicate, the way in which they communicate is a way that is on brand. And that goes back to my point earlier about you need to have a solid brand in place, because if you don't, the latitude for misunderstanding actually becomes quite large, and then things will become fragmented, and that's a recipe for disaster.
Thank you. And then I think this will need to be the last question, just with the time that we have. I don't know if this is going to be too large a question. It's from Hossam, who says, I need more elaboration on Marketing 5.
I need more elaboration on Marketing 5.
Yes.
I'm not sure what Marketing 5 is.
Okay. That's all it says, unfortunately.
Sorry, I'm not trying to dodge that question. If you want to send Lynn the question, I'll be happily to get back to you via email. Marketing 5. I don't know if that means the measurements, but it's a struggle to guess on that question. I'm sorry. Lynn?
Can help you with in your organization. Then we have a number of options, whether that's virtual or customized webinars, etc. So if you do have any interest, then please do contact us at the email address cts@informa.com, and we'll be happy. There we are. Thank you, Darren. So cts@informa.com, and we'll be happy to help you out in any way that we possibly can. So thank you again, everybody, for attending. And Darren, thank you very much. A very, very informative webinar session. So really do appreciate your support.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day and stay safe.
Take care. Bye now.
Take care. Bye.